Okay, so this is the next step for the continuous lanyard. So what you'll need at this stage is your little D-ring with your swivel claw or your key ring or whatever you're using. And before we do anything else, we're going to slide this onto our fabric here. Just like that. I might put it up at the end just to keep it out of the way. Okay, so now just to make sure there's no twist in it, let's put it together. And what we need to do next is just open up this strip of fabric that we've ironed nicely now. And we need to do that with both sides. And then we need to place our right sides together. So the edge, the side that will be on the outside, they're the sides that need to be together. Alright. So we're getting this ready to sew a seam down the side here. Okay, so we're going to put these short edges together. And I'm just going to put a few pins in there just to hold it all together. Okay, in the next step we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and sew these two pieces together. Okay, so for this next step we're going to sew about a 1/4 inch seam down these two short edges. Now before we do that, I'll just tell you how my machine is set up. I'm just using a black thread just so you can see what I'm doing clearly. I've got my machine set to straight stitch and with a 2.6 stitch length. I have my walking foot on my sewing machine, but you can usually do this project using a standard sewing machine foot. The walking foot just makes things a little bit easier because you've got those feed dogs at the top. And I'm using a size 90/14 needle in my sewing machine, universal needle in my sewing machine as well. Okay, so I'm going to sew these two short edges, like I said, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to place it under my presser foot. Alright, and I'm going to make sure I do my back stitch. It doesn't make too much of a difference with this, but just to stay in the habit of it, and I'm going to remove my pins as I go. And then reverse stitch at the end of that as well. Okay, so I'll just need to snip my threads and then I'll take you over to the ironing board to show you the next step. Okay, so I've finished sewing this seam now and trim the little tails off the threads there. So now what we'll need to do is open it right up like this, and I'm going to use the iron to iron this seam open. Okay, let's get in there with iron so it stays nice and flat and open like that. Alright, and then all you'll need to do now is fold it all back in place. Alright, and then we'll give this one more quick iron before we take it back over to the sewing machine. Okay, so now we're ready to do the top stitching on both edges of this lanyard. So what I'm going to do is just so I can keep my edge lined up nicely and do probably about a 2 to 3 millimeter or about a 1/8 of an inch distance away from the edge. I'm going to move my needle right over to the right so I can use the markings on my plate here and on my foot to guide my fabric along. If you don't have that option, you'll need to pick a spot that's near your needle, and that's about 2 to 3 millimeters, or that 1/8 of an inch away from your needle. You might like to stick some tape along there just to remind you where you need to be guiding your fabric. Okay, so I'm going to move my needle right over. Alright, and I'm going to line my fabric up with the markings on my sewing machine. Okay, so I'm going to lower my presser foot. I'm just going to put my needle in the down position, but it's not essential with the continuous lanyard. I just like it to start and stop in the down position. Okay, and I'm going to sew forward a few stitches and then do my back stitch just to secure it in there. Alright, and I'm going to keep on going all the way around, and then when I get back to where I started, I'm going to do a back stitch just to secure that stitch in, and then repeat the process on the other side. Okay, so I've finished sewing all the way around that edge, so I just flip it over, probably snip those threads first, and just repeat that process on the other side. Okay, so we've sewn our top stitches on both sides of the lanyard all the way around. So now we're ready to finish it off by sewing a rectangle just to secure this D-ring in place and stop it from sliding up and down the lanyard. Okay, so what I like to do is find the place where we did the seam to join the two ends together, and I like to place that seam just inside the D-ring there, and that kind of hides it away and you don't notice it that much when it's in there. Okay, I'm going to make sure my two sides of the lanyard are together, and I'm probably going to sew about 1 inch away from the D-ring, just so it doesn't get in the way of the presser foot or your walking foot when you're turning and sewing in a different direction. I'm just going to move my needle back over to the middle there. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is put my needle down where that first line of stitching goes across, and I'm going to set my machine to start and stop with the needle in the down position. If you don't have this function, then just use the hand wheel to and turn it towards you to get that needle in the down position when you're stopping and doing pivoting for this part. Okay, make sure my presser foot is down, and I'm going to sew all the way down to this next seam, and then I'm going to back stitch all the way back up. Okay, when I get back to the beginning, I'm going to make sure my needle is in the down position, lift my presser foot up, and I'm just going to pivot the lanyard around. So now we're going to be travelling down the top stitched line there. Okay, and I'm going to go down maybe about 5 stitches. Okay, so make sure needle's down, press the foot up, and I'm going to pivot again. Alright, this time I'm going to sew to the line and then back stitch and then sew back again, and this will really secure the lanyard and stop this stitching from coming apart. And just one last time. I probably could have gone one extra stitch. It's okay. Okay, and then I'm going to back stitch just a couple of stitches just to secure that thread in place there. Okay, so all I need to do next is just snip those little thread tails off, and then this lanyard is finished.